So, yep, we'll discuss migration in this talk and some pitfalls to avoid. So, we'll see first what is a migration for uh, hopefully new customers coming into Odoo, new user. So, once you've gone through the experience of a migration, uh, it's like puberty, right? It's you've made it, and so we'll see what the experience is all about. We'll see why it's different than anything else, and we'll see how it's done, or at least how we do it at OSI. We'll see how much it cost, or not only cost but effort, and few tips, few getaways to take from this experience. So what is a migration? So basically you like Ricky just explained, you migrated from another systems to Odoo. It might not be a 45 days experience, but maybe a longer one, and it's an up and down emotionally and for the whole organization. And now you've been on the system, you want to stuck with it for a couple of years because you don't. It's such a huge investment. But at some point, the system is not supported anymore because Odoo only supports two or three versions, or you get new features, or you need to get to the newest versions for some features, for some uh, capabilities that you want to provide your customer. So moving to a new version, well, you'll need to set up your infrastructure first. So in our case, we could be setting up new environment, new servers for test, QA, and production. We'll need to migration includes the feature. So, and we'll see later, but that's what basically Odoo releases in what they did in a month ago, pretty much. So new versions come with new release, or new versions come with new features, and maybe some have been dropped, some have been refactored. So there's a couple changes there. The data needs to be migrated, so all the transactions that a company has been created on their current versions needs to sometimes move to the and rearranged because the data model has changed. So there is some heavy scripting that needs to transform the data so it's usable, accessible in the new version. Integration as well. Again, we're talking about ERP system here. So it talks, the application talks to other applications. So we'll need to make sure that the API changes, that there's no break or regressions into transferring data and maybe converting data from Odoo to another application, or when from the application to Odoo. And last 2 points, documentation and people. Again, we're talking lots of users sometimes with different usage, and they've been used to the application for quite some times now. And so they may be using it not the way it was thought or designed in the first place during the implementation projects. So maybe you want to correct bad behavior, or you want to so in any of those cases, you'll need to we need to take care of updating the documentations and the people. So why is it different than anything else? And maybe the comparison we can use is maybe upgrading a phone or upgrading a computer. The idea there is it's not a personal choice. It's a because it involves lots of people in the organization, and you can't always predict how people will react to change. And again, especially with integration, there is third-party application that will that will be impacted. So, and most of the time there's lots of customization. I've seen companies, and that was a couple of years ago, they stayed on an open ERP version 3 or 4 or that was tiny ERP at that time. And they just stayed there for years and never upgraded because they had too much customization. And so they got stuck on their version, and the organization died with the system at that point. So how this is done? So, and here it's important to differentiate the Odoo parts, the Odoo out of the box, that where we can include the Odoo enterprise stuff, and all the customization where we can put there all the public module that you downloaded, the maybe the add-ons you purchased on the App Store, the OCA modules. So that's important to differentiate the two, because in terms of infrastructure, not really any change there. You set up your new environment, whether it's servers or namespaces in a cluster or whatever you guys are used to. In terms of features, so especially with the customization, there'll need to be some analysis, because the feature may be provided in a new version in a different way. So it's not like a stupid migration where you just move the code and hope for the best that it's no, because hope that for the best that it will be a ISO feature. No, it might be already there, so you can maybe drop the module, or you'll need to tweak it because, for example, Odoo changed the data models. Think of the move from account invoice to account move. So lots of customization needs to be analyzed and migrated and tested, and make sure that you provide the same workflow, same feature. With the data, and that was a interesting topic in the last couple of years. I'm interested to know about your experience, but we've got customers buying the Odoo Enterprise contract, and when they come to the time of the migration and send their data to Odoo, the time frame was sometimes 10 months or a year to get the database migrated. And obviously, I got a case of a government organization. They didn't have that luxury to wait for 10 months. So good thing is we have other option here. Good one is the OCA Open Upgrade one. And for some customers with very limited scope, we've been doing export and imports. So start the project from scratch, export the data from the previous version, and import it into the newest version. I've done project as well where we connect to the database directly of the previous systems and pull out the data from there and do all the data model changes or conversions of the data through scripting. For the data part of the customization, migration script may be needed if the data model has changed. I don't think that happens that much with the OCA module, but it's still a factor to evaluate and take into account. Integration, so there are some integration with Odoo core. Thinking about carrier integration, bank integration. In the US, they might have you may be using tax cloud. So all those other systems may be taken care of. And again, and if you have customization there, they may be included in the core. That might, if Odoo decided to support it, but it might not be there. So again, you need to migrate, you need to test, and and make sure that everything works. Regarding documentation, that needs to be, and again, depends on the format of the that the customer is using. Could be Word documents, could be a e-learning platform, could be the Odoo module for that. So that needs to be reviewed, updated. Maybe some screenshots needs to be retaken. And for people, that includes maybe some training sessions, some go through those documentation update, some scheduling as well to do the switch over, and make sure that there's nobody left aside. So a few migration we've done, and I was able to share the data there, but you can see the source and the target version, the number of users involved, number of module installed on the source version, the effort it took for the implementation, and for some of those that was not done by us, or I wasn't able to get the module, the data, but and the migration that we've all done, and that's the time it took for some of those. Of course, the number of user and the number of module is not maybe detailed enough, and maybe there is for sure other metrics to look at. And for example, the migration from 7 to 8, it was technically a big step because of the API changes. Some other version changes, some other migration, when you switch to a version Python 2 to Python 3, that takes more time as well. But again, like if there is some other metrics to take into account, we look at the number of source lines of code. So that's one thing. We look at Odoo suggested $18 per 100 lines of code. I think that's what we use as well. For OCA module and public module, there is a better chance to get those module migrated for others. So the cost, what we do is we divide the cost by 2, and that's how we estimate the migration for a new customer. And what we try to do as well is get customers on board with, so based on that estimate, divide the cost on a monthly basis and include this in their support plan. So basically every 3 years they can migrate to the newest version. So a couple tips and suggestions, and I think Ricky in the previous talk mentioned it. Challenge each and every customization request. What we try to do is, why do you want to do this? Is there a business case behind the customization? Like, if it's something you do once every 2 months and it takes you an hour, and you want to reduce it to 1 minute, that's just an hour saved every 2 months for one people. It's going to take a long time if it's 50 hours of development, it might not be there's no business case. So if it doesn't make sense for now for one customer, it won't make sense for any other. And there's nothing that will, so there's little chance that anybody in the community or any other customers will use that feature, even if it's public and available, and use it. In the other hand, if it's 20 hours of development, and you save maybe 2 minutes every day for each and every person that performed the process, it may be worth it. And if it's worth it for you, it may be worth it for others. And so that's where the business case is. and that's where there is a good chance that the migration or the customization will be done, but also maintained and used and migrated when you'll move to the newest version. So that's the first step. Once you decide, okay, this my customization, we can't escape it, we need it, there's a business case, make sure to document it, make sure to, if you can, even publish it so that people can use it and maintain it for you, and like I said, migrate it. I've seen lots of customization in customers that we got where they made those with a studio, and there's no documentation, and it's hidden somewhere in the database, and you're pretty sure that if you just migrate or even upgrade the current version, upgrade the module, you'll lose some feature. So that's the one of the bullet here is Odoo Studio. That my recommendation is to only use it for prototyping only, just to make a proof of concept, validate some interface with the customer, but don't install it in production. Use existing OCA module as much as possible. Again, if the business case was there for someone else and is there for you too, there might be a module out there, and take advantage of it. And that's a great way to reduce your implementation cost and reduce the migration risk as well. If you can budget your migration from the beginning, like I said, we have some basic formula to estimate, especially before going live, what's the scope of the project, what's the number of lines of code, and how do we distribute those modules between what's Odoo out of the box, what's the paid module, what's private, what's public. And so they apply different costs based on the probabilities to get those migrated by others. If they are private, probabilities is 0, so you'll have to support financially all the migration effort on your own. So that's why budgeting those customization and migrating those, especially if they're private, is important. Migrate a year after the previous release. So, for example, if you are on version Odoo 12 or even before, now may be a good time to start talking about migrating to 14. And why 14? Well, because again, 15 was just out a month ago. There might be bugs that needs to be fixed, and you've been through that experience on your implementation. So let the new customer that will migrate from other systems to Odoo 15 clear out the bug, and also pay and finance the migration of OCA modules starting now, and maybe for the in the first half of 2022. We'll be going through lots of implementation projects with 15, and so those projects will migrate maybe half of your module that you're using today on 12. So you'll get them next year if you want to migrate to 15. And you can see from the table before, nobody's moving every version. It's a pain. It's an experience. You don't want to repeat it every year. So on average, it's 2 or 3, maybe on average, maybe 3 versions. We've got some people that does 4, and that's I think it's a good strategy there. Here is the table again, so you can see we got some 8 to 11, 8 to 12, so at least 3 and sometimes 4 versions. Any questions, feedback, experiences that you had with your migration projects?
I have one, Max.
Yep.
Do you have experience with customers who want to migrate and implement new customizations at the same time?
We try to avoid this for the reason that, I mean, there are some customization. I wouldn't say customization, but because the thing is, in migration, like I said, is an opportunity, or maybe it's not an opportunity, but it's like there is change. So the thing is, there is change you can control, and there is some you can. And so there is change, and the change you can control because Odoo decided to do stuff in a different ways. So you'll have to. It might not be customization, but it might be stuff that the customer wants to do during that migration. And for some, you can say, yes, that's fine. We can include it because that's the way Odoo does it with this new refactoring of accounting, for example. And that's fine. I mean, there's good customization and there's bad one. And the bad one is basically they will add more complexity because it might even confuse the user. So what you want to, and a good one, the difference between a good one and a bad one is whether there's a disruptions in the operation for the company before and after the migration. So if it's a good one, then the company will be better off after having migrated than it was before. So that's the case. Otherwise, I would say if it's, I would postpone those customization or those new feature requests to the next release or the next version you want to provide your customer after the migration. So give them maybe a couple weeks or months on that new version. Let the dust settle down, and then you can look at all the customization or request that was on the table.
Okay.
There is an additional question from Pedro. Pedro, are you on?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I see that my camera is not turned on. Okay, no problem at all if you hear me. I want to share my experiences and comment about what you have said, Maxime. I hardly agree with some of your thoughts, but some of them I'm not very agree. So let me share this personal thought about you have thought about exporting and importing information as a way to migrate to between quotes a database. And it seems there's some noise. Maybe you can mute. Not sure who is talking. Okay. So I hardly no recommend to do that because it's losing all the sense of migration. Because you can say no, you are exporting and importing master data, but that master data is very limited because as an ERP you have everything connected. So it's not only a problem of this data, but the connection with them, the legal requirements you have also, because you would need to maintain the old system during some years after the legal requirements are expired. For example, here in Spain, we have to keep the accounting books for 5 years. And print it or export Excel things for this information is very limited, and maybe something that you regret when you have an audit. So the alternative is to keep the old version in online until the requirements are expired. So I don't recommend to do that. So let's go for a full migration with all the things involved. About the numbers, I'm very surprised of the big numbers. I don't. My numbers are more are lower, but maybe it's because from the beginning we have followed the rest of your recommendation, challenge any customization requests and so on. So having, as I see, one database with 500 modules being big or small, that's a very absurd thing, having that amount of customization. I'm for sure don't allow to go to that limit. So, not sure if my numbers are representative from yours because the number of users and so I don't have such a big database with 250 users. But the most shocking one is your last line, having only 20 users and a moderate number of modules to require such a big number of hours for migrating to version 8. It's true that the API has changed, but these changes are not very disruptive and you can still use on version 8 the old API. So not a full conversion is needed. So that's only my impressions over your numbers, but they of course are ladies.
Can I step in here and ask a question or try to how can I say that moderate among the figures of Maxime and your impressions, Pedro? I mean, from my experience, it's very difficult to compare one migration to the other. That does involve also the approach that you take. So I think it's not the advice of going through export and import or doing a full migration is always better in every single case. So when it comes to migration, it's always a question of what do you want to achieve and what do you have to achieve for legal or other reasons, what approach to take. So it's not, to my experience at least, it's not always the better choice to do a full migration, and it's not always the better choice to import and export using flat files either. So that depends pretty much on the case. And I think that I don't know whether Maxime is sharing this or agreeing to that, but I think every migration project has to be handled independently. But nevertheless, I would love to see different integrators of the world share their ideas on migration, because that is a growing issue, and see if we can identify factors that contribute or suggest one path over the other. Maxime, can you?
Yeah, I mean, to answer all those feedbacks, again, it's not. This is not meant to be the truth or whatever. This is meant for a potential user or Odoo customer that look at this and have been stressed about the migration, and this is our reality here. Yes, there is, and again, that's part of what I explained. What's a migration? You can check there, but there's a human factor. There is an organization factor, and again, those numbers don't tell what's the level of requirements that the company has. What's the number of modules? Yes, 500 is a lot, but the thing is that's the requirement of the organization. They have 250 users. They have a wide spectrum of services and business requirements. We got project or customer there, like the one here with from 8 to 11 with 20 module, 30 user. They were just using stock and using Odoo as a serial number database, but still it was a government organization. There was millions of data to be migrated. There was security requirements because of the organization, and so that needs to be factored in. And I think this is just a view, a perspective. Pedro has another one, and again, we worked on different markets. We may have different kind of companies. We may have different approach during the implementation. And you can see here, half of the project I mentioned, I haven't done the implementation. I'm not the one responsible for all the choices that was made during the implementation. So I need to live with what's already there when the customer calls me and say, hey, I want you. And if he tells me I want to migrate, well, yeah, it's maybe 2,000 hours to migrate from 7 to 8 because that wasn't done by me. That wasn't, the migration, when you get on board at that moment, is same as the implementation. You learn the customer processes, you learn the customer people, and that needs to be factored in. And those are factors we don't control. Like you just said, also Frederick, is there's different options to migrate. Do we always propose the same one to the customer? No. We go through the exercise of at least the Odoo migration service, the OCA open upgrade, the export import. And so we try to give the customer all the options, provide estimate for each, and they make the choice. And each of those has pros and cons. So purpose of this talk is expose those numbers to the ones who think about migrating, and if it generates a discussion where we can collaborate on making those numbers, and not only mine, but the ones of Pedro and any other integrators that do migration, if we can get on a solution that make those numbers lower, good, perfect. I mean, I've shared with my team yesterday the Odoo module migrator. If that helps us divide those numbers by 2 here, big step.
Let's see. I mean, thank you, Maxime, for that great talk. I think doing the first thing is to share the numbers and spread the word about it. And I'm happy to do the same and get into a discussion with you about the figures and about the contributing factors to the complexity of such migration projects. There's another question in the chat from DP. I hope you can answer that shortly because we're running out of time for that talk. He asked, Maxime, can you jump from version 11 to version 14, or do you have to go version by version individually?
You have to go version by version because the migration script. So if you go from 11 to 14 and in between Odoo change the account invoice to account move, that migration step I think is done in between 12 and 13. So if you don't go to 12 and run the migration script to 13, you won't get that data model being changed. You will still get your data in the account invoice table, and that will never show up anywhere in your Odoo 14.
Yeah.
So you need to go version by version.
Thank you, Maxime. Great talk. Pedro, I'm sorry to cut you short.
Well, I only want to say that's why that reason is another little different with Maxime's approach, because we don't recommend to jump between 2 or 3 versions, but migrate as soon as possible to the next possible version. And we have customers that migrate each version. So you don't accumulate because at the end you are needing to do this jump version per version, but on your local instead to the customer. But this is the users to get used to this constant change we can talk about, but nothing more. We can move this debate to other 3 slots or on any occasion, or maybe make her. Yeah.
Pedro, I suggest to take that off discussion and put it on the track. One webinar on the Discord channel. I'm happy to have you on board here and this vibrant discussion.